please forgive me on this, but it's either $30,000 or $35,000. I can't remember the exact number, but
wow.
Let's say it's $30,000. If there's $30,000 left in that account, you basically just jumpstart their retirement by then rolling over those assets into a Roth IRA for the child, so long as they have earned income. It's incredible.
So how do we overcome setbacks in our careers? I know I've had a few, and when this happens, what do you do? One of the biggest challenges is the financial decisions that need to be made on a day-to-day basis and with the family. And if you're in a mid-career professional like I am, well, this can be a huge challenge. I know in my house, I've got one kid in college, one ready to go. I'm an entrepreneur, and that financial mountain some days looks pretty high. But, let's talk about that a little bit. So welcome to the True Man Podcast, Jamie Lima. He is the president of Woodson Wealth Management and the founder of Allegiant Divorce Solutions. He's a certified divorce financial analyst, which, by the way, and a CFP, I don't want to leave that out. Those things are not easy to get. And he works with mid-career professionals to help them achieve their financial goals. So, Jamie, welcome to the True Man Podcast.
Thanks so much, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Jamie, tell everybody, there's got to be a reason. What led you down this path of becoming a financial advisor?
A financial advisor. Well, I'll share a little bit about what brought me to being a certified divorce financial analyst and financial advisor, if that's okay. We can
Absolutely.
We'll go way back in the time machine here. So when growing up, like many of us out there, I was the product of a divorce. My parents got married really young. My mother was 20 years old when she had me, which sounds. I have a 20-year-old stepson right now, and I can't even imagine him having a newborn baby.
Right.
And my parents, bless their hearts, they tried, but it just didn't work. And about the age of 7 or 8 or so is when my parents decided that they had enough and decided they were going to go their separate ways. And it was myself and my sister and my younger sister and my mom, for the most part, living under the house. And there were a lot of financial pressure. There was a lot of financial pressure that I saw even at that early age that my mother was going through, and probably my father. I of course, like a lot of divorced families, I spent a lot of time on the weekends with my dad because he was working during the week. But 75-80% of my time was spent with my mother. Even at an early age, how challenging it was for a single mother who was very young at the time and didn't have a lot of education and skills to be able to go out and find a job to be able to support the family. So it was very, very tough. And I tell the story all the time to people that I'm close to, and I'll just share it with you here because, like I said in our earlier conversation offline, that I'm an open book, and I'm happy to share this because it hopefully will help some of your listeners. But I remember right after the divorce happened, one of my best friends, his name's Richard, and he and his mother walked into the house with do you remember the Dole pineapple boxes or the Dole banana boxes that you saw at the grocery stores when you were a kid?
Yep.
I don't know if they still have them laying out there or not, but I remember him bringing that box, and they put a box of groceries on our counter so they could help us fill the pantry because things were so challenging. And when I couldn't really wrap my head around it, but I at the same time, I was like, wow, I think things are really maybe a little bit tougher for mom than she's letting on, so to speak. And I knew then, like, as I get a little bit older and I keep going back to that, I go back to that memory all the time because it was so impactful to me. And my feeling is that especially growing up, was like, if I never want my kids someday to ever feel those same financial stressors that I did, and never have to go through that same experience. Yeah. And in many ways, that's what led me to the financial planning aspect of things, because the long-winded way of me answering your question is when you don't have something, sometimes that's the thing that you gravitate towards, right? And in our case, it was money. And I wanted to make sure that I managed not only my own finances better than my family, my parents did, but also help others make sure that they don't go through the same experience.
Yeah. Did going through that experience have an effect on you and how you felt about money? some people have negative experiences about that. So
yeah, that's the behavioral finance of things, right? I mean, it's like your relationship with money.
yeah.
I always feel like I'm going to be destitute. I always feel like even today, I'm always worried about, like, if anything, if everything fell through, like, could I survive? You know, how would I survive? It's always in the back, the further recesses of my brain of, if anything ever happened, like, and I'm always planning. They tell you not to have a plan B, right? Especially as an entrepreneur, you should never have a plan B. But I'm always thinking, what would happen if something happened? What is the next step that I need to take? And maybe that's, just my protective mechanism, some kind of protection mechanism for myself. But
I don't think a plan B is a bad thing to have.
You'd be surprised at how many people I've bumped into over. I don't know, maybe it's just, maybe it's too much TikTok bad advice, entrepreneurial bad advice on TikTok. But a lot of people say, oh, you should never have a plan B. I'm a firm believer in it.
So it sounds like some of the things you went through when you were young they're still driving you today.
Absolutely. That's why I do what I do, right? I never want to have my clients ever feel the same way about money that I had to go through. My family had to feel, and the feelings that I had around it. And that's why that's where the financial planning comes in, is to make sure that when we start building a financial plan for the clients that we work with, we stress test that plan to the max. And, we run all kinds of scenarios, and we use really powerful software to ensure that whatever things will come their way on down the line, whether that's, higher inflation or tax law changes or changes to their income or health issues, because most of us are all going to, unfortunately have to face health issues on down the line too.
Yeah.
And we take all those things into consideration. And that also ties into the divorce financial planning too. Like, 50% of people that we talk to and that walk amongst us every day are likely going to go through a divorce. And that's where the financial planning for divorced families comes in as well.
Yeah. I'm sure you're able to provide people wise counsel on that. And unfortunately, the statistic that's always been around is, I think the divorce rate is somewhere around 51%. I haven't looked at this as of late, but from everything, the feedback I'm hearing is that COVID has actually caused that to go up and increase. And I don't know if that's an attribute of people just getting tired of hanging out with each other, or what the deal is. But there's probably a lot of guys that may be listening to this podcast right now. They've either gone through a divorce, or they're going through a divorce. And from everybody that I've been exposed to and been around, unless they're independently wealthy, and very few people are, it's like a punch in the mouth when this thing hits, because it just does crazy things to your income, not to mention your personal life. So when somebody comes to you and they're going through this, how do you help them maneuver through what is ultimately a sticky process, to say the least?
Yeah, sticky process, and it can definitely be a punch in the mouth. It depends on whether you're the one that decided on the divorce or not. It can be a little bit less of a punch. But the first thing I tell everyone, and in all of our introductory meetings, the one theme that I try to share with them is, once you vocalized and literally said that you've either heard that we're going to get a divorce, or somebody, your spouse wants to divorce you, or you've decided to let the cat out of the bag and say I want a divorce, and share that. Because saying those words, I've had to do it myself personally, and it is the most challenging, probably the most challenging words that you'll ever say in your life. But as soon as you release that energy, things change dramatically, and they can change for the better, they can change for the worse.
Yeah.
And the first thing I tell people all the time is, once those words have been vocalized one way or another, whether you're the recipient or the person delivering that unfortunate news, you want to surround yourself with Team You. Team You should include your loved ones, your friends, your pastor, whomever, right? You need to share this information with. You should In some cases, people can go through the divorce process without legal help. I was not in that camp. So get yourself a good divorce attorney to help you navigate the legal aspects of the divorce, and hire a certified divorce financial analyst, whether it's me, whether it's somebody else. And the reason being is because the attorney is going to be there to support you legally.
Yeah.
The CDFA, your certified divorce financial analyst, is going to help you from a financial perspective and work through the mathematics of things. And your family and your loved ones are going to be there to prop you up from an emotional perspective. And if you can do all three of those things, if you have the means to do it, amazing. I understand that that's not always the case. So, you do what you can do with that, in that scenario. But if you have the means, I would absolutely create Team U.
Now, I just think that's fantastic advice. And quite honestly, it's coming from somebody who's walked the walk, right? Because that is, that doesn't necessarily all have everything to do with X's and O's. It has to do with life and just trying to get through that. So not that what you went through is a good thing, but it sounds like you're able to benefit your clients by having walked the walk.
Absolutely. And I'm human. Even though I'm a financial planner, I've made financial mistakes in my life. Even though I'm a CDFA, I made the mistakes in my own divorce. And we're all human. We're all, and there's a lot of emotion that goes into this process. And it's easy to make mistakes because sometimes you have blinders on and you're just ready to just get this thing over with. And that's not always the best option. So the benefit I have sharing my experiences with my clients is I've stepped in a lot of the landmines and that I can help them circumvent.
What's the most challenging thing when people are going through a divorce that they come to you with?
The most challenging thing that people come to me with divorce is probably, like I said, trying to just get through it as quickly as possible. Because they're racking up attorney bills.
Yeah.
It's taking a lot of time. They don't understand the court process, the legal process. And then sometimes the process, there's no rational, it's not rational. There'll be things that will come up in divorces all the time where the one of the parties will do something or say something, and us as rational human beings will look at it and go, that doesn't make any sense. Like, they can't do that. They can't. There shouldn't be parental alienation, and they can't. Borderline. I have some situations where there's borderline domestic violence, and us as rational people, we look at this and go, they can't do that.
Yeah.
But the courts don't care in a lot of ways. And that's the biggest challenge people face is we want to look at the rational side of things, but the courts look at the legal aspect of it. They don't care about, I don't know, them stalking you at work. They don't, maybe they do, maybe they don't. But like I've seen situations where they're like, well, it's not really domestic violence. Just because they threw away your stuff doesn't mean that it's domestic violence. That, from my perspective, it totally does. But when you experience those types of things, it will make you want to go through the exercise as quickly as possible, and then you can make some financial mistakes. And that's I think that's the biggest challenge is balancing all the EQ and the IQ of this whole thing. That balancing all of that out is a challenge.
Well, it's not a normal process to go through. I mean, is that fair to say? It's not getting into relationships feels pretty, this coming from a guy who's not divorced. Okay. So full disclosure, I've been married for almost 27 years, thankfully. But I mean, it seems pretty normal to come into relationships. It doesn't always, it seems a little greasy coming out of them, right? A lot of times. I mean, what can you say? It's just, and money's involved. And so you get the fun part, right? Because now there's, not only is the relationship ending, there's money involved, which is even throws a whole other level into this thing.
Absolutely. And that's where you have to manage expectations for the client and help them understand, navigate the process and do more. I think in a lot of cases where we're more financial therapists than anything. Even though there's a lot of people out there, they throw out that word like it's some kind of professional designation, but we spend a lot of time with them. I met with a prospective client this past Saturday, and half the time, she was crying. So, or on the verge of tears, and it's a challenge. It's definitely a difficult thing to navigate. And even though statistics will tell you that, you should not have a second marriage because 65+% of second marriages end in divorce. I did find somebody and did remarry a few years ago, and it's just a totally different experience the second time around. And I think, to your point of getting into a relationship is so easy. My now wife says all the time, you should, before you have a child, before you have a baby, there should be a test that you have to pass. It's kind of the same thing with marriage, right? Like, you should have to go through this. Actually, should have to go through an exercise of being able to pass to make sure you're compatible or something, right? Well, I don't know why they do that, but
it's kind of funny to think about. Quite honestly, it is kind of funny to think about. But I would put it to you this way: so, as you, a financial advisor, when somebody comes to you, you have a list of questions that you're going to go through. You may even have them fill out a portfolio before they even show up, so that you know where they're at, so you can begin to put a plan together. And quite honestly, relationships are much the same way. We just don't treat them that way, right? It's like, nobody meets somebody and says, you want to have kids? How many kids do you want? Like, how do you feel about money? What kind of cars do you want to drive? What kind of house do you want? I mean, at the end of the day, some of that just seems almost impersonal, when you're trying to get to know somebody. But the reality is, when we get married and we have a life together, money's a factor. The kids are a factor. I mean, Absolutely. All this stuff turns out to matter big time. And when kids are involved, as you're well aware, and we're talking about financial planning, now we got a whole other thing that is really difficult to maneuver around on a number of fronts.
Absolutely. And as you were saying that, the thing that came to my mind was, that's where sometimes that's where a prenup will come into play and save some situations. Maybe the concept of a prenup shouldn't be so taboo.
That brings up I'm not qualified to talk about a prenup, because it's not anything that I know much about. Is that something that you deal with quite a bit?
Not so much, only because it's more on the legal side of things versus the financial planning side. Yeah. But I have a handful of clients right now that have, we work, like you mentioned at the outset, we do work with the mid-career professionals, and people that are on average, the client that we work with is somewhere between the age of 30 and 50, and really just starting off and starting to get combined finances with a partner and start. I think we have right now 3 or 4 clients that are going to be married this year, and maybe after this conversation I should tell them that.
Don't blame me. No, I'm not responsible.
My friend Mike told me you guys should not get married. I'm kidding. But I have had the prenup conversation with them, because there have been a few situations where the relatively young people that are working in these technology companies, a lot of their compensation is through things like company stock and restricted stock units and so on and so forth, and they're building wealth at an early age. And by commingling those assets later on, it could put them in a not so great position. I have one gal who just had a sizable inheritance from, unfortunately, her grandfather passed away, and she received a sizable inheritance, which is going to help jumpstart her life. And she's getting married in October. And we had the conversation multiple times about her situation and being very, very careful going into it because of that. So we deal with it from that perspective, not so much from the legal perspective.
No, but I mean, that's actually good to have somebody walk you through that process, because just hearing somebody say, hey, you have substantial wealth here, just watch your step, as you're preparing for things. I think it is wise advice. So now listen, I hate to do this. I really hate to do this. Listen, here's what I'd like to know. So because honestly, I try to flip the news off as much as possible, but let's face facts. The economy's rough right now. Now the stock market, as best I can tell, I used to be one of these guys, Jamie, where I would be working in my office and I would have the business news and I would mute it and I would have it over on the side, but man, that thing was going all day. Now I haven't done that in probably 4 or 5 years, because quite frankly, they don't talk about business news anymore. They talk about politics, and most of the business news they talk about is hoo-ha and not sound investment advice, as best I can tell. But the economy's struggling and inflation is the real deal and prices are high. And it seems like, the money we're making is either steady or gone down. So that makes everything, whether you're going through a divorce or whatever, just that much more challenging. What are you seeing on your end as a professional? What's going on out there and how is it affecting people?
Great question. And you're absolutely right. What's the term that we're all getting poor slowly when inflation starts to rear its head. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now. I've been doing this. I cut my teeth in the business at a very large company, financial services company back in 2006. And 2 years later, we were in the throes of the Great Recession.
Yeah.
And it was good and bad. It was good because it gave me a tremendous amount of experience and certainly empathy for people that were, our clients and learn how to help people navigate these types of challenging times. And that was challenging. I wasn't sure. There were some times when I wasn't sure if my key was going to work in the lock, because there were a lot of banks that were being bailed out and ours was one of them. And it was pretty gnarly. But it also, at the same time, it was like I said, it was amazing because I helped people navigate those times. And the reality is that there's almost every day there's bad news, right? There's always a reason not to invest. Yeah. And this is a struggle that we face with clients that are just starting to build wealth and trying to figure out what they're going to invest in and how they're going to invest and so on. And we constantly have the conversation of well, do we want to do it now or do we want to wait a few weeks? And well, what about after the election? Or what about after this thing happens or that thing happens? And the reality is that unless you need the money that you're investing within the next year, you should be investing in appropriately diversified, risk managed portfolio for your goals and objectives. Because you're absolutely, I do the same thing. I have just off to my left here, I have the TV with CNBC and just so I can keep a finger on the pulse of what's going on. But it's on mute because if I have to hear Jim Cramer scream at me through the TV one more time, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. 3 o'clock Pacific is when he comes on, and that's when I start to put the MLB Network on or something a little less. Amen to that. But it's certainly a challenge out there. I think right now there's anybody that has any cash that's sitting off to the sidelines that needs that money within the next year. They should be looking at high yield savings accounts, things of that nature, just to get a little bit of a return while not putting the cash at risk. But if you look at let's rewind the tape a little bit. Last year it was Russia, Ukraine. The year before that it was the coronavirus. The year before that it was tax law changes. And the presidential cycle. Then we can't invest now because who's going to be our president and is it going to be Trump or is it going to be Biden or there's something and then a couple of years before that it was Russia again. Remember there's always something. We can pandemics or last night I was watching the Bernie Madoff documentary. I hadn't seen it yet. So I watched the Bernie Madoff documentary and it reminded me of all the stuff that we've seen, even because in 2008, when all this was going down with him, I wasn't focused on Bernie Madoff. I was focused on saving my clients. Yeah. And now that I watch this, I can't believe all the stuff that this guy did. But if you look even going back over the last 15 years, every year there's a reason why we shouldn't be investing for some reason or another, whether it's inflation or taxes or politics or whatever.
Yeah.
I think it's all just noise, man. I mean, it's all just noise, and we're doing ourselves a disservice by listening to it. And if you look at how professional portfolio managers manage investments for their clients, they are looking at a 10 and 20 year time frame.
Yeah.
They are not worried about whether or not it's going to be, whether the markets go up or down or sideways tomorrow. They're looking out 10 plus years. And I used to the way I explain to people is they're not, and just to put it, using an analogy here, it's kind of like the weather, right? They're more concerned whether or not the trends are going higher or lower and there's global warming or global cooling. The rest of us are down here going, is it raining? Is it snowing? It's the day-to-day stuff.
Yeah.
And they're so focused on the long term. And that's why when we manage portfolios for clients, we focus, we have a ton of research that we get, and we every Friday I go through all of our research just to see if there's anything we need to make adjustments for our portfolios on with, and it's all, we're looking 10 years into the future for the most part.
Well, I think you have to. And, the example I always use is my son is now 20, basically sophomore in college. Mm-hmm. My daughter is graduating high school. She'll be a freshman in college. And when we first found out we were pregnant, we went back to our financial advisor and he said, well, start saving for college immediately. Mm-hmm. Now, the first thing we did was open a 529 plan. Before he was even born, we opened a 529 plan. And, we started socking money into that thing. And we did the same thing with our daughter when she was born. And here's a softball for you, Jamie. Through the magic of compounding, here they are. They show up for college. And by the way, we stopped putting money into that plan. So if anybody knows anything about 529 plans, the bad part about it, they're a great vehicle, but the bad part about it is that money is for college savings only. So you can't pull it out for anything else. So whatever's in there, they either need to use it, or I guess you can give it to them and maybe their kids can use it. So, but it's a great vehicle. So we're at a point now where our kids are going to college, and through the magic of compounding, this thing is just elevated. And it's been beautiful because it's the one thing I can really point to and go, wow, compounding's real, man. And so, we get the bill and I send it off to the company. They send us a check back and we're whole, and we probably paid for some of those books and all that stuff 20 years ago, quite honestly. And now we're kind of, I like to think, reaping the reward. So, talk about that a little bit, because people underestimate. And then if you have a short time horizon, I get it, but talk a little bit about that whole magic of compounding and why it's so important.
Absolutely. It's a perfect example of it. And the rule we always go back to is the rule of 72, mm-hmm. right? Have you heard of this rule?
Yeah.
And the rule of 72 is how long does it take, at what particular rate of return whatever rate of return you're getting, if you divide that by 72, right? So if you have, let's do some quick math here, right? So if I'm getting 8% returns in 9 years, I should double my money. It's pretty powerful. And to your point about the 5,
is what happened basically.
Yeah. And if you're getting, if you get some years you're not going to get 9% returns or 8% returns, of course, but on average the stock market's somewhere between 8 and 9% on average, and like you said, you probably paid $5 for a $50 book.
Yeah,
based on the power of compounding and dividends and interest and things of that nature that have come in. So it's the earlier you can start with 529 plans, the better, especially with the clients that we work with that are now starting to raise families and such. That's one of the main things we talk to them about is college planning. And the benefit that I don't know if if you've heard about it or not, but there's two really key benefits with 529 plans right now that didn't exist in the past. And it's only one change happened last year. Another change happened, I think, with the tax law changes in 2017, if I'm not mistaken. But you can now use some of those funds in the 529 plan for K through 12. Mm-hmm. So if your child goes to private school, or my sister actually did this with my nephews, because they wanted to put them in a private school and didn't have the cash on hand to, in savings accounts to do that. So, but they have a 529 plan that they started, and grandma and grandpa have been putting in for the last few years, and now they can use that to pay the tuition on private school. And then with the tax law change, with the changes that came about this past year with the Secure Act 2.0, if you have anything left in the 529 plan later, you can roll those assets into a Roth IRA for your child.
Oh, see, I didn't know that.
Yeah. The limit, I think, is your listeners, please forgive me on this, but it's either $30,000 or $35,000. I can't remember the exact number, but let's say it's $30,000. If there's $30,000 left in that account, you basically just jumpstart their retirement by then rolling over those assets into a Roth IRA for the child, so long as they have earned income. It's incredible. Amazing.
I love that. Now you got me excited. I don't know that there's going to be anything left over, Jamie, but it's just important. We live in a time and a place where, for some strange reason, everybody thinks that they're going to go viral on Instagram and that's going to be their job. And I can't for the life of me figure that out. But anyway, my kids come home all the time and they're like, boy, so-and-so is an influencer and they're making six figures. And I'm like, so is that a career thing, or like, how's, and the backup plan, I don't care what anybody says. Now, listen, it's Mike's opinion here. Okay. Jamie has nothing to do with this. Mike's opinion. I understand colleges are a little wonky these days, and, maybe kids aren't getting the best education depending on where they go, but still, nobody can ever take that piece of paper away from you. And the gap between the haves and the have-nots is getting bigger and bigger and bigger all the time. And that was my PA announcement for today, Jamie. So sorry, I didn't mean to.
I'm a firm believer in it. I made the mistake of taking a couple of years off after I finished my first 2 years of college back east. I'm originally from Rhode Island. So I went to school in Rhode Island, did a couple of years there. And then I moved out west. I got tired of shoveling snow and decided I was going to move west. And now I'm in sunny San Diego. But I had to take time off because I had to feed myself and house myself and to be able to just stay here. And I just didn't have time for it. I was working multiple jobs at that time. And then I went back as about 25 years old, 25, 26 in that range. I finished my BA, my bachelor's in finance, and then momentum kept me going for the MBA and everything else. But I didn't go to Harvard either, but it was the experience of going through that exercise of doing the work and studying and being in that, learning how to write a paper and and all of those things that they teach you that are ancillary to the actual coursework. I'm all for it. I think even that's why I'm so appreciative of people that go back later in life and get their PhD at 50 and 60 years old or whatever. It's like, just good for you. Just don't stop. It's so beneficial.
Yeah, I don't think that and that kind of tees up your industry, because and in life, really, if you stop learning, you're dead. Really. I mean, that's in my mind. I mean, we should always be learning. I went back, got my degrees, later in life. That's just, I had my head in the sand when I was young, and, but I just think it's critically important. And therefore, I mean, people like you who can help people maneuver and start when they're really young, it's just so critical. Especially with the cost of education today, it's really out of control, and there are a number of reasons for that I won't get into today, because that would be a complete political rant. But the cost of going to college compared to what some of these kids are getting when they come out, it's not in line with anything. So you got to start planning early.
Absolutely.
Jamie, before we wrap up today, there is so much to talk about in the financial arena, and there's no way I could think of it all. But I want to make sure if there's something that you really want to touch on that's going on in the marketplace today that you feel like people need to know about, what kind of advice would you give them?
I'll go back to your earlier comments about the influencer. I cannot tell you how many conversations I have with people about things that they've seen on TikTok.
I didn't see this one coming.
Yeah, absolutely pure garbage. Leveraging an insurance product as a quote unquote bank account or retirement fund or whatever. Setting up an LLC is the one I see a lot. Set up an LLC and you're going to save on taxes. It doesn't work that way, people. It doesn't. An LLC is for liability protection.
Yeah.
And then, these people, these guys and gals have, 100,000, 200,000 followers just absorbing all this stuff. So my advice, and we talk a lot about the financial planning process and divorce and how, getting through that, like that's all of that's important. But what's most important is all the screen time that we have, right? We spend all this time in front of our phones and everything else, and all this garbage is scrolling in front of us all the time. I think it's okay to take some of that advice and think about it and go, does that really sound right? Well, let me do some research on it. But the people that are out there that are acting on this advice, man, I feel bad. I feel bad. And I get it. It's because it's free advice. It costs money to talk to us. It costs money to hire a financial planner or a CDFA. It costs, I get it. It's an investment.
It costs a hell of a lot more money to not have proper planning.
You said it best. You said it best.
There's no way to say it.
We do a ton of pro bono financial planning every year to help in that realm. So if your listeners have questions, or we can have a 15-minute phone call and I could straighten them out and put them on the right path forward, even if they don't hire us. I don't care. I just want to help people. And my team feels the same way. So they can, if it's not with me, they can talk to one of the members of my team here. I have 4 other advisors on the team and that are all certified financial planners, that are all amazing people that are they just want to help people like as much as I do. So I think that's my if I were to have any parting words, that would be it. Just
wow, I didn't know I hit the nail on the head when I said influencer. But I can see it. It's bizarre. It is absolutely bizarre to me. And I, in fact, my kid said to me the other day, now this made me laugh. I got to admit, we were talking about this and I said something about influencers and my son goes, well, do you know what an influencer is? I'm like, of course I know what an influencer is. He goes, basically you're an influencer. And I'm like, well, then I need to get a clothing deal. I need to get, I don't know. It's funny how these kids think today. In my mind, I use social media. I know you use social media because we have to be found. We have to be visible. Not a huge fan though. I'm not a huge fan. It's kind of a time suck, but it's part of promotion and being out there. And if people can't find you, they assume you're not real. So it kind of is what it is. But as we wrap up today, Jamie, we'll put this stuff in the show notes, but how can people reach out to you or find you and contact you?
Yeah, I think the easiest way is just to go through the website. My calendar. There's a link to my calendar where people can schedule, that 15-minute call that I mentioned. That's on there. If it's not with me, it can be with somebody on my team. We're on social media, and all the social media stuff is on the website, so they can find us there as well. But I think the website's the easiest. So the website is woodsonwm.com, woodsonwm.com. We are at the base of Mount Woodson here, just outside of San Diego. So that's where our namesake comes from. But all my contact info is in there. My cell phone is listed on the very top of the page there, so they can call me or text. Anybody can call me or text me there. We're happy to help wherever I can.
Sounds good. Jamie, thanks for coming on today. We talked about a wide range of things, but I think all very important information in what is really some challenging times for people they seem to be finding a way to spend money. I can't quite figure it out. They just haven't figured out a way to save. So that's where you come in.
Probably. We just went to the mall this weekend. I couldn't believe how busy it was. I thought I hadn't been to a mall in 2 years, and I thought for sure there were going to be myself, my wife, and 5 other people, and the place was packed. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting times, but Jamie, thanks for coming on and talking with us. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, take care.